Have you ever stopped to think about how streets got their names and why houses ended up with numbers? It feels so normal today. You type an address into your phone, follow the map, and arrive exactly where you need to go. But for most of history, things were not that simple at all. Long ago, cities and towns were much smaller, and people usually found places by memory, landmarks, or local knowledge. Instead of saying 12 Park Street, someone might say the baker's house near the old well, or the red house beside the church. In small communities, that worked just fine. Everyone knew everyone, and directions were based on what people could see around them. But as towns grew into busy cities, this old way of giving directions started to fail. More people arrived, more homes were built, and streets became crowded and confusing. Visitors, traders, messengers, and government workers needed a better system. It was no longer enough to describe a place by a tree, a market, or a famous building. Cities needed order. Street names began as practical descriptions. Many roads were named after what happened there, where they led, or who lived nearby. A road leading to a market might become Market Street. A path lined with elm trees might be called Elm Road. A street where blacksmiths worked could become Smith Street. Some roads were named after churches, kings, local families, or important events. In many places, street names were like tiny pieces of local history, telling stories about trade, geography, religion, and power. House numbers came later, and their history is just as interesting. At first, many places did not see the need for numbering houses, but governments eventually realized that counting and identifying homes made life easier for administration. They could collect taxes more accurately, keep records, organize military service, deliver mail, and improve public control. In other words, house numbers were not created just for convenience. They were also tools of management. One of the biggest reasons house numbering became common was the rise of postal systems. As letters became more important, postal workers needed exact addresses. A name alone was not always enough, especially in large cities where many people shared the same surname. Numbering houses made delivery faster and more reliable. It turned confusing neighborhoods into organized systems. Different countries developed different numbering styles. In some places, numbers were simply assigned in the order houses were recorded. In others, odd numbers were placed on one side of the street and even numbers on the other. That method became especially useful because it helped people locate buildings quickly. If you were looking for number 21, you already knew which side of the road to check. Sometimes house numbers changed completely when cities modernized. Local governments reorganized neighborhoods, renamed roads, and renumbered homes to fit new city plans. For residents, this could be frustrating. Imagine living in the same house for years, only to be told that your address had suddenly changed. But for city planners, it was part of building a more efficient urban system. Street names and house numbers also became symbols of identity. An address could reveal whether someone lived in a rich part of town, an old historic district, or a working-class area. Certain street names carried prestige, while others reflected local culture or political change. In some countries, streets were renamed after revolutions, independence movements, or national heroes. So an address was never just about location. It could also reflect history, pride, and power. Even today, the system is not perfect. Some streets are renamed for political reasons. Some cities still have confusing layouts, duplicate names, or missing numbers. Rural areas in many parts of the world may still rely on landmarks more than formal addresses. Yet, despite all that, the basic idea remains incredibly important. Every street sign and every house number is part of a long story about how human societies became larger, more organized, and more connected. What seems ordinary today was once a major innovation. Without street names and house numbers, modern life would be far more chaotic. Mail would get lost, emergency services would struggle, and maps would be much harder to use. So the next time you read an address, remember this. It is not just a set of words and digits. It is a piece of history shaped by the growth of cities, the needs of governments, and the daily lives of ordinary people. Something as simple as a street name and a house number helped turn the messy world into a place we could navigate.